Hi, Dwight Livingston.
Mark Minton.
Hi, we're giving a talk for the U.S. exploration sessions for the 2020 virtual NSS convention. And it's going to be on our recent expedition to Carlsbad Caverns and the Mystery Room. Part of it is Mystery Room surveys being conducted, so we were doing surveying, and as well, special this year,
We did a bunch of high leads, technical climbs, and spent a lot of time on rope. So I think it'll be pretty exciting.
I think so. So let's watch. High adventure in the mystery room of Carlsbad Caverns. Carlsbad Cavern is in Carlsbad Caverns National Park in New Mexico. And the expedition this year is part of a few expeditions for a current survey of the mystery room section. And you can see in the map that the mystery room is right next to, it comes right off of the guided tour of King's Palace, and goes right off the tourist trail. Carlsbad Cavern is developed in the Capitan limestone of the Guadalupe Mountains. And the ridge of the Guadalupe follows this blue line here. And for a picture of that, from Carol Hill's wonderful book, shows the escarpment of the Guadalupes and the visitor center right there, as the arrow already points. And again, the most of Carlsbad Cavern, and particularly down in the big room, and including the mystery room, is developed in the Capitan Reef, the Capitan limestone, the massive member. There have been quite a number of surveys. I think we've come across survey stations from at least 7 surveys in the mystery room. The more recent, last map that was done wasn't even finished, but it's a draft in 1988 by CRF, as shown here. And there's a current effort to produce a complete map of all the sections. A number of these sections have already been done. This, for example, is Lower Cave that Ed Kloster made, and is a really nice example of the cartography going on at Carlsbad Cavern. The mystery room had some survey done from 2007 to 2010 by David Engels. This was then picked up, Rod Horrocks asked me to continue that effort in the mystery room to complete it. So there have been pretty much annual expeditions done 2017 through 2019. A few trips by rangers doing some special little survey trips to get some areas in the low part of the cave. And then last year we did a trip that included surveying up in Mabel's room, which is part of Lower Cave and has a window that looks down into the mystery room. Well, we got there and there was both a couple of nice leads going out into the mystery room, plus a utility rope hanging from what I thought of as a jug handle, but it's really a stone bridge. And that looked very enticing, thinking, well, I have to go back and see that sometime. And also that 2019 trip, Tim Bilzicki and I were surveying the north wall of the mystery room, and we spent a while lying on our backs with Tim shooting a Disto X2 up in the ceiling around some windows, and I was sketching according to his numbers, just doing the perimeter of these windows. And consistently we're finding a ceiling of around 80, 90 feet, and then in the windows a higher ceiling at 110, 115. So the proximity of those after we got back and laid that out suggested that we might be able to do the Mabel room leads and come over to these windows. Also, if that didn't work out, we were proposing for 2020 a bolt climb up the north wall. And looking at that in profile, here's again Mabel's room. It looks like just a short hop over here. Should be doable through these windows. And in addition, who knows, but there was a window above the big mystery room slope that we were distoing to 220. And just maybe that we could get to that. So that was the proposal we put in. I have some east-facing sections that I just wanted to point out that the cable slot, I keep saying cable pit, but it's cable slot. And this plays an important role in the apogenic development. There's supposedly a lot of the aggressive water and hydrogen sulfide was coming out of this pit. You can both, when it was water filled and then later was the atmosphere coming out of this was eroding a lot of the walls and speleothems in this area that gives the mystery room its really ghostly look. And so this lead being above the cable slot suggested that, well, maybe this might go somewhere, since that's a cave-forming feature. So we were approved, and so we last February, end of February, we were approved. So we started our 4 Easterners got our Western gear together and headed out to New Mexico, where we took up quarters in quarters 56, and on a Sunday, I think March 1st, we headed in to go to Mabel's room and tackle those leads. This shows me, Dwight Livingston on the left, then Bob Alderson, Mark Minton, and Ivan Drones. It was the 4 of us who spent a week of expedition there. And indeed, we went to find that lead, used that utility line to pull up a rope, and went up to what we called the donut to see what was going on up there. And there's Vonnie coming up through the donut, and this is what we found. This was our lead. We had used all the rope we'd brought at this point, so I was sort of like at the end of that rope, but it was certainly enticing.
You can see straight down from where Dwight's looking is the first one of those windows you could see from the floor of the mystery room. So this is right out over the floor, about 60 feet off the deck. And as we go out on this ledge, the floor of the mystery room slopes down. So we're getting higher and higher off the floor as we go. But we stayed on rope a good bit of the time. The very first day we were there, we came up from the lower cave, as Dwight said, but that's the long way around. So we rigged this drop from Mabel's room down to the mystery room. So in the future, we could just come into the mystery room right off the tourist trail in the Queen's Chamber and go up directly to where we were working. And we used a lot of rope. In fact, every day we would basically run out of rope, come back and ask for more. And they ran out of cleaned up, measured pieces of rope. So we took fresh rope off the spool. We had to wash it to get rid of the chemical sizers and so forth, and then measure them and cut them and so forth. So we were constantly resupplying ourselves.
And that's Aaron Lynch, who was very helpful, one of the cave specialists, helped us out. So as Mark and Bob were laying down all this rope on the ledges up on the ceiling, Vonnie and I began surveying. First, we calibrated. We calibrated it instead of a surface course. We calibrated in Mabel's room, and I found that was a nice way to survey to calibrate the Disto X2s with the longer shots. Seem to get more precise angles on the calibration. and we began to survey. This is looking back up to very close to the donut hole where we were starting. Maybe Mark can talk about the traverse line.
You
here.
can see there's a rope lying on the floor there, and even though you could relatively safely walk across this, it was quite loose. A lot of it was sort of sandy underneath a thin crust of flowstone. And just off to the lower right is that 60-foot drop I was talking about. So you really wouldn't want to slip and start to roll off the edge. So we kept everything pretty much roped up, which is why we used so much rope, because we were on rope even when we were going horizontally. And out at the end of this, what starts off as a ledge, it develops an opening on both sides. And so then it becomes a bridge, and the bridge gets progressively narrower as you go out along it. And near the end of the part where it becomes a bridge, there was this formation, eroded stalagmite, that really looked like a calla lily. And so we named this, Yvonne came up with the name Calla Lily Loft for the ledge and bridge that we were on out over the ceiling of the mystery room.
This shows that bridge. I'm going to use the pointer if it comes on. There it is. That runs about 60 feet over the ceiling of the mystery room. The calla lily formation is about here. It slopes down and tapers to about 2 feet
Wide.
2 feet wide in this section. You can see underneath the north wall that is being bridged too.
And here's the narrow part of the bridge, and at that point, the left wall becomes solid again, and the hole to the right goes back down to the floor, but the floor is sloping down in the mystery room, and the ledge we were on is sloping up, so we're getting farther and farther above the floor. And there had been a single set of footprints on part of this ledge up to this narrow part of the bridge. But beyond that, we didn't see any footprints. And Bob Alderson led the climb of this ledge. It's wide enough, but it's undercut, and it's a long way down. And we really didn't know how stable it was. So Bob did a great job. He lassoed some of these stalagmites and used those as anchors. And it was really intimidating the first time, but once we had gone up and down it a couple times, it didn't feel so bad, but it was pretty exposed. Here's a picture of Dwight. This is now across that traverse, looking back at the bridge. And you can see that there's just not a whole lot of footing there, but the rope makes you feel pretty safe. And at the top of that little climb traverse was another wide area. We sort of called it a room, but it wasn't really a room. It was just the continuation of the calla lily loft. And it was full of holes in the floor. You really had to watch where you were walking. There were some holes that went straight down all the way to the floor of the mystery room, which is probably now 75 or 80 feet.
90. This is
or 90 feet down. And lots of very beautiful formations. And we assumed that this was virgin because there had been no footprints past the narrow end of the ledge. But when we got to this point, you could see down through holes in the floor. And I looked across this hole and I said, wow, that looks like 1-inch webbing. But I thought it couldn't possibly be 1-inch webbing. It must just be a fallen over stalactite or something. So we got over there and I looked in the hole again, and it really was 1-inch webbing. So here's Bob going down to check it out. And there was 1-inch webbing around some flowstone and an old-fashioned 1/4-inch rawl bolt in the flowstone. We have no idea where this came from. The park people don't seem to know about it, but obviously somebody sometime either did a bolt climb or a very bold climb up into this area, or they got across from the end of that bridge without leaving any tracks. But in any event, we were shocked to see this, and it meant that part of it at least wasn't virgin after all, but there was no record of any of this.
It did reach we reached the end of it only about 20 feet beyond where we found the roll bolt. It ended in speleothem choke and a dry pool, which had some very nice shelf stone, some either pool fingers or at least coated soda straws and fairly small pool fingers on that side. But this is how it ended in a formation choke. So that, while Vonnie and I were surveying that, meanwhile, Bob and Mark had already started a boat climb. I'll let you describe it.
Yeah, before you get to the narrow part of the bridge, we had gone underneath this dome, and it had really nice white flowstone coming down, and we figured, well, what the heck, there might be yet a higher level. So we had bolting equipment and permission to climb. So here we are starting up this dome. The dome turned out to be about 65 feet tall. It wasn't particularly big. It was pretty challenging because it was spiraling around and slightly overhung. And at the top, it didn't go very far, but it was extremely well decorated with all manner of very small and larger halictites and so forth. This is a picture of Bob Alderson cleaning the first leg of the climb. We did the climb in 2 stages because of the lengths of our ropes.
That's about 2/3 the way up?
About half, I think.
Okay. And then at the top, well, Vonnie and I were surveying in other parts of the cave, doing some cleanup, but after Bob and Mark had done the climb, we were here about 2 days later to do the survey. So we went up and found at the beginning of this small room that Bob had named Saint's Garden because he felt privileged to be there. Blessed to be there. That's right. That's right. He was blessed to be there. This picture shows what was said to be calcite rimstone. We've seen a lot of rims, not rimstone, rims, and you see a lot of in Lechuguilla the gypsum rims, but this is supposedly calcite rim. The Saint's Garden is really, you have to go through very carefully. It's a little gymnastic challenge to go through, but it's full of electites, some shelf stone, pools, just about everything. And then here towards the end of it are some marvelous snake dancers. This one in particular is, as you can see, is more than a foot tall.
So after the Saint's Garden climb didn't go anywhere, so we surveyed and then it got de-rigged. But up across that narrow part of the bridge and up the traverse, there was another hole in the ceiling, and we couldn't get back far enough to see if it was really a passage or just an alcove, but we were there to climb, so Bob climbed this one. This is a picture of me cleaning the route after Bob got to the top, and it did go. It was walking passage. In fact, it looked much better than the Saint's Garden. It looked like a real cave passage. And as soon as we got off rope, there was a little room off to the side, and it wasn't very remarkable except for the fact that it had this 2-inch deep notch all the way around the room. And I'd never seen anything like that before. We had some discussions with people, and Donald Davis says there are places like this in Lechuguilla. Presumably it was filled with water at the same level for quite a long time, and hydrogen sulfide oxidation at the surface creates acid, and if the pool level doesn't change, then the acid etches a notch. So it's kind of the opposite of shelf stone. It's a negative shelf stone. There was a small amount of walking passage, some nice calcite, and another climb. So Bob also did the second climb. You can see there's what looks like walking passage up there, not very far above his head. And sure enough, there was walking passage up there. Just at the top of that climb was another room. On the right-hand picture, you see this rock behind my back, kind of looks like a sea turtle, and a tall, narrow fissure heading off with airflow. So we were very excited. Here's a picture on the left of Nathan Canaris. He's in the slot in that tall, narrow fissure. They joined us the last couple of days of the trip. And on the right is Abigail Mack. She's helping survey. And this tall, narrow slot went to a very deep pit, and there was good airflow at this pit. So Here's a picture of Bob Alderson getting ready to go down the pit, see where we are or what might be down there. We only had 9mm rope that day because we were on a push trip. And if you've ever used 9mm rope, you know it's a little scary when it's rubbing on sharp popcorn and so forth.
It's a
So
200-foot 9mm rope.
200-foot 9mm rope. So here he is in putting in a bolt for a rebelay, and he went down this 200-foot rope, but of course we used some of it for rigging, and he didn't touch the floor, but he did come out in the ceiling of the mystery room where Dwight had distoed that 220-foot dome. So at least it saved us from a 200-foot bolt climb. But it didn't go anywhere we could tell. There were some alcoves in the walls, but we didn't spend any time trying to swing over to those. Also, back in that room with the sea turtle looking rock, there was another hole in the ceiling. And so that was another bolt climbing opportunity. So here we are going up that flowstone. The red rock on the right is actually sort of more like dirt. It is very strange, like material left over after the limestone's partially dissolved. And here you can see on the left, Yvonne is belaying. She does lots of belaying. I'm very grateful for that. And the passage kept going up. However, it only went up about 40 feet, and it finally ended at a little ceiling pocket, no possible continuation. But again, very well decorated, lots of beautiful little snake dancer and worm-like halictites, and a lot of dogtooth spar.
This was the high point.
The high point of the whole expedition was the top of this bolt climb, even though it didn't go anywhere. And that top of that climb is 200 or more feet above the floor of the mystery room down below, even though it's not a direct connection. So the only lead we had left was that at the pit that Bob went down and got short roped on, you could look across and see what looked like big passage on the other side. So on our last day there, we bolt climbed across the wall of this drop, which is a little interesting. You step off the very first bolt and you're 200 feet off the floor. But it was very good rock and very straightforward, got across easily. And once I was over there, we rigged a J-hang to get across because it's not very easy to follow an uphill traverse on the wall. And here's a view on the left looking back. That's Yvonne on the other side of the 200-foot drop. So it's pretty wide. I forgot how wide across there it was, 30, 40 feet, something like that.
Yes.
And very, very well decorated at the top. Anthodite bushes, popcorn. Some of the older formations, like the one on the right, are eroded away, which is not uncommon anywhere in the mystery room, as Dwight said. The big passage narrowed down very quickly, but it kept going. It had airflow, started going up again. So on the left, you see Aria Mildice, who was a park intern and a caver, and Yvonne in this passage leading off beyond the 200-foot drop. More snake dancer halictites on the right there. And we got up a little ways up this passage, and then we came to a drop. So here's Aria sitting at the edge of this pit. Turned out to be a 60-foot drop in 2 sections. And at the bottom, it got quite tight. And everything was covered with popcorn and aragonite and dogtooth spar. So Aria came up with the name Sharps container, like at the doctor's office where they put their needles. Everything was spiky. And here's on the right, a stalagmite covered with aragonite. Pretty cool place. However, it didn't really go. At the bottom, it got narrow again and choked with formations. And the airflow was coming from a passage which was too tight, headed back toward the 200-foot drop. So we think the airflow was just local circulation. This is a picture down, partway down that pit. Bob was checking a high lead. I was looking down the lower part. But that was essentially the end of our exploration in the top of the mystery room.
We got it surveyed, and fortunately, you could come out late. It was the one day you could come out late because Aria had the code to get out of the visitor center.
Yeah, I didn't mention, but earlier we were frustrated several times because we had to leave the cave by 5 o'clock. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to get out because we'd trigger an alarm. So we had relatively short days, which is frustrating.
So our 2020 expedition for the mystery room was a big success. We had 887 feet of new survey. Most of that was virgin. And that was out of a total of 1,000 feet of survey. This is a profile, a compilation of the all the profile sketches and just running through it. You can see here Mabel's room and the floor of the mystery room and that initial climb up to the donut, and then Calla Loft running all along here. Most of this section being a bridge, about 60 feet of bridge across the floor of the mystery room. Saint's Garden and the bolt climb up to Saint's Garden. The second bolt climb that got us to High Adventure. Short bolt climb here, and this was the high point we mentioned in Mark's bolt climb. Short rope pit, which hangs out over the mystery room, and then back into all the Sharps container. This is Sharps container out here. And you can see it. Maybe another view is in a draft of the map profile view, draft profile view, with all the same components.
So one thing that we were hoping that we might go off the map and develop some more cave west of the known part of Carlsbad. Mystery room is the westernmost passage in the cave, but it turned out everything we did was directly above the known mystery room, but we increased the profile dramatically.
Yep, and so there's still some leads. That's what I've been saying for the past 4 years, that it's almost done, and it's still almost done, but we'll be back next year. So thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed it. And maybe we'll have another report next year.
Hopefully so.
Okay.